Welcome to Culmination, where we're not experts, but we sure have a lot to say. In the process of becoming our best self, I have with me the aspiring astrophysicist, Claire Atkinson, to discuss identity. And with that, let's get started. So, the simple question is, what is an identity?
Well, at the simplest sense, it's how you define yourself, like that sense of self. And really, there are a lot of types of identities. Like, it's just how you define yourself with relation to every aspect of society that relates to you. A lot of people, especially teenagers, have a lot of trouble defining who they are. And that's actually Erikson, in his developmental stages, said that teenagers' big struggle is between identity and role confusion. And so basically, throughout the teenage years, it is your mission to find who you are so that you can function in society later on. And so that doesn't mean that you can't change your identity later on in life, but it's just the main struggle of that certain phase, usually. And so people usually come up with their identity, but if they don't, then what that means is that they have like role confusion, according to Erikson, which means that it might affect them later on because they don't know how to act with relation to certain aspects of society because they never developed that part of themselves. And I think an interesting thing to think about is that like identity really, since it's like how I defined it, it's how people define themselves with relation to certain aspects of society. I don't think it would be as prevalent if there weren't, like, if you were the only person on Earth. I don't think it would be as prevalent because really identity matters by how you interact with other people and other things. But I think you still would have an identity if you were the only person on Earth, but it wouldn't have to be as complex. And I think that's the beautiful thing about identity. But that brings you to the important distinction, is that you can let society influence how you develop yourself, but you shouldn't let it define how you identify, because there are a lot of like societal norms and stereotypes, and at the base level they're there because there is some truth to them, but that doesn't mean that you have to follow them, because there's no one right way to define yourself. And in developing your identity, you just make sure you know where that line is, so that you know that you can be who you really are. And that's another hard part about it, is that you have to figure out where your influences are coming from. So basically, I mean that it's difficult for people, including me, to sometimes know whether I am developing a part of myself to please someone else, or because it's really what I believe, or what who I am. And so I don't really know sometimes. And I think if you get to the base of that, then you'll be really much better off in your life, because also a lot of identity forms subconsciously in my experience. And so do you have any experience with forming an identity, Casey? Do you I don't know, what do you think on all that?
It is kind of an interesting situation, just because, like kind of how you mentioned, where it's like the people around you kind of influence things and whatnot. The way I view it is we're kind of like, I know I'm going to use the buzzword, we're kind of the culmination of all of those factors. Just because it's like, so most of us, I feel like maybe 50% is like of our identity is like based on how we perceive ourselves, and therefore like how we present ourselves, and like that covers our actions and our thoughts and our beliefs and whatnot. So that 50% is like us, like decided by us. But then I feel like the other half is almost exclusively like formed by your relationships with other people or just experiences from an outer front, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. And that also begs the interesting question, how much should you let outside influences influence your identity, really? And how do you know where to draw that line? Because
Right.
I think you would be remiss to not allow some of your friends or parents to slightly influence your identity, because when you're defining yourselves with relation to them, with relation to your parents, with relation to your friends, you have to take them into account, or else that's not going to develop like a meaningful identity with relation to that aspect. But also, at the same time, you can't let that go so far as to define every aspect of who you are. You still have to have some sense of self without the group. Right. And if you don't, then you might feel, I don't know, very bad when you're away from the group, which isn't a bad thing, but you also have to be your own independent self and feel proud of yourself for that.
Well, it's also just like, when it comes to friends or family, we can usually tend to like lean towards extremes. And what that means is we either follow exactly how they do, like their own beliefs, what they say, their actions, like mimic them essentially. Or we're the complete opposite extreme, like we try everything in our power to be the complete opposite of them. Because really it's just kind of hard to get it right, like the midpoint of like, all right, these are the things I like and like identify with me from other people, but these are the things that I don't agree with or I don't want to fall in line with. So I feel like just that process of like kind of how you find the median. It's like of numbers, like you just cross off like one side and then the other until you eventually keep crossing them off and see the middle. Yeah. And kind of like the process is just kind of thinking for yourself, like weighing the situations and weighing the things that identify with you until you find the middle, which is closest to the truth.
And like you said, that would be very hard around other people swaying you. I often wonder whether if I went off to like some really remote cave and like meditated for a year, whether I would be better off, whether I would like know myself more truly. But I don't really know. I think I would gain a part of myself in a different way, but I think I would lose some of that social aspect of myself, and also there's not a lot of questions that you have to answer for yourself in a cave. I mean, unless you bring them yourself. So like society brings up these questions day to day that you have to answer. Do I want to help this person who dropped their stuff, or do I not? And that brings up like moral questions that you have to think about. How do I answer that based on myself and my identity? And a lot of people don't realize that their identity plays into that kind of stuff. But when you're kind of isolated, those questions don't come up, and you're not faced day to day with like obstacles and challenges that kind of shape and mold your identity and kind of exhibit it too as well.
Well, if you think about it, it's kind of like tying it back to my metaphor of like the two sides of you that like equal into your identity, who you are. It's kind of like 2 meters, if you will, and you have to fill up both of them. And if it's completely filled up on both of them, that's like your true identity. But I mean, if we're thinking realistically, you will probably never fill it up entirely, like throughout life. But like kind of saying, or going off of your cave like analogy there, I feel like you would actually strengthen that one side of you, the half of you that is about yourself. I feel like that would be heavily strengthened, but you would not gain anything from the other front. So like, you'll become knowledgeable and one with yourself more than ever, probably. Like that's probably the best way to raise that exclusively, but then you miss out on the other half and you're just kind of a hermit at that point.
Yeah. So it's interesting to think about. And I think the biggest reason why identity matters in of itself is because depending on how you define yourself, it defines the interactions and the choices that you make down the road. So say, for example, like think about if you're playing D&D and you're designing a really elaborate character, and all of those aspects that you put into your character, you have to act like that the whole game.
Yeah.
And it influences the choices you make, the things you're allowed to do, the things you're able to do when you roll the dice and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just like life, when you roll the metaphorical dice, there are certain things that choices that reflect your identity, that make you who you are, and people notice that. And I'd say the best thing is just to make sure that you're staying true to who you are. If you want to live a really good life, I think it's very fulfilling to finally to live up to who you are and who you believe that you are.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes it's like another like crossroads with that. It's like some people act too much in a way that is not like them, like doing extra things or like exerting themselves in a way that is just not like them. But it's also interesting on the other side where some people like noticeably hide parts of themselves, like when they roll the dice and they're acting as a character. It's like that persona that they play is like, it's not staying true to themselves because they're like, like hiding a part of themselves. Like, oh, maybe they love to dance or something, but they think that they'll be made fun of if that ever got out. So they would always like hide that and act more like stoic or whatnot,
Yeah, that also a lot of times is a struggle for people I've seen because peer pressure, societal expectations, those play into influencing who you become. But once you find out who you want to be, who you are, then it can sometimes push back on you a little bit. And I think the biggest thing is to not let them. And I know that's a really hard thing. That's an easy thing to say, but not a really easy thing to do. But really, it's just something that you kind of have to learn how to do if you want to live a good life, because there are things and there are people who are I don't know, who are watching you, but if you live a life that's not your own, then that's also, how do you know that they wouldn't like you as you are?
Yeah, and you need to be able to stand your ground at times. Like be assertive or, just basically tell them what you want out of something. Like don't be a pushover. But also sometimes you need to be more agreeable if you're on the other end.
Right. So, as teenagers, everyone is going through the same thing. Everyone wants to find who they are. And
why do you think that is?
Well, I think it definitely interplays with like the stage in life in which they are. Like I guess if you think through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, by age like 13, you've established that you have safety needs. Most people, a good amount of people, have established that they have the physiological needs of food and what's not, and then they have the safety needs. They have like shelter, and they have technically, and an income. Some people might have a job. Some people might have parents that like provide for them, but they've provided those two needs, and then they get up the ladder and they have like friends, so they've found their like love and connection needs, and then they come to like the self-esteem level. And I wouldn't say that that's necessarily identity, like the big focus of it, but they've definitely like established a life for themselves and are able to find their place in that life at that time. I think it also interplays with that they're just about to go off into society, and find their jobs, their work, their just, you know, their future. And it's actually interesting that you ask that too, because it'd be interesting to see if identity development happened at a different time in a society where people went out to live their future. Like say back in like the medieval times, like people got married at like age 12. Like, did they develop their identity quicker because they needed to have it because when going out into the world? And
they also lived a lot. Like,
yeah, and actually the term teenager wasn't really developed until like the 1800s, 1900s. So I mean, there wasn't really a defined like teenage years until just now. But I also think it has something to do with just, you know, puberty. It's a big thing, and it throws a lot of people for a loop. And yeah.
Do you want to discuss that a little bit? Like, how so?
Yeah, I guess so.
Obviously I know, but like for discussion.
Yeah. So I mean, with a larger amount of hormones, you're sure to have some effects. And identity, really, when you think about it, it's not a tangible thing. It's not, you can't reach inside someone's brain after they're dead and find a little chip and, you know, oh, that's their identity right there.
SD card.
Yeah, it's not, we're not robots. And it's interesting to think how it really forms. It's all the connections between the neurons, but it's such an intangible thing that, I mean, it's hard to prove that it exists, but it's also kind of hard to prove the human consciousness exists, but it does. Yeah.
I mean, how are we talking if it doesn't?
Exactly. Maybe we're all in a simulation. Who knows? But yeah. But what you were saying with like puberty, we wanted to talk about that a little more. So like people start developing physiologically, and I think that kind of initiates a change also mentally as well as a result of some of the hormones too. But I'm not a scientist quite yet, so I don't know that for sure. But
we're not experts.
Yeah, we're not experts. But I would say that just like having to confront changes in your life helps you confront other changes, and it kind of brings on a wave of change. I mean, but also there are some younger, like there are some elementary school kids who know who they are, and I don't know, it sometimes changes, but it's not definitive. It's not definitive for everyone. Like there's not one set time when people develop their identity, but like it is very, very common to happen in the teenage years.
Or just because that's like the part time, like if we're taking a page in Erikson again, like just a development stage where it's like they're just kind of like, you know, you're developing physically with puberty, but also like you're becoming more conscious to the world around you. So you start kind of asking questions and wanting more. Like you're very curious, you're very resentful to some systems in place, you know, like parental authority or institutional authority or whatnot. That kind of explains the rebel nature, but also you're just confused because it's like, who am I in this world? Like it used to be so simple. I mean, I think I talked about this in the comfort zone episode, where it's like you start wanting more and the comfort zone isn't enough for you like it used to be. But now this is like I'm changing and I'm basically ready to grow. Like I can't do this anymore. But also, like, aside from that, I kind of want to get into this a little bit. Just like we've talked about teenagers, and it makes sense for how that plays into a role. And also we are teenagers, and like it's interesting to hear our perspective in this while it's going on. But really, like, I want to kind of talk about adults, because I don't want to leave them out of the equation. Like, I mean, we're not adults yet, and that definitely falls out of our area of expertise, but like some of them don't really know their identity yet. And even if they do, it's like it never truly ends, like the search.
I agree.
Which isn't a bad thing, but it's a neutral statement.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on
So I think adults definitely go through multiple, like, as I said, like, the world presents us with challenges and choices we have to make that help us be aware of things that we need to change and or just know about ourselves. But adults, they go through these things too, and sometimes they don't. Their identity doesn't stay the same from the teenage years. I think the reason the teenagers are associated with identity is because, like you said, it was the first time they really started, like, questioning the system, questioning their parents.
Yeah.
And it's the first time they do that, but it's not necessarily the last either. And someone could continue developing their identity until they're very old, but I think it would still have kind of the same core aspect as they developed that first time, but it doesn't have to be concrete in that.
Or just like some aspects that they haven't ironed out, depending on what goes on. Because I mean, think about like all the different things, like a change in jobs or change in job setting, or heck, this pandemic, like adapting to that, maybe losing your job or having to work remotely, or whatever else. Like maybe like you care more about like the world situation because like you have a job and you pay taxes and you have to, like, you worry more about that because you're independent, like you're not dependent on your parents anymore. But also like having a child or something like that changes things because you go from your previous identity of like
you have to gain that whole new identity.
Yeah, like being your own guy, or even like marriage too. It's like like you're still an individual at the end of the day, but it's like now you're in a linked partnership, and it's like you don't have to be married per se for that. That's just like a way to I guess make it official. But even just having a partner, like permanently, you know what I mean? Like just kind of trying to reach out to more and more people, because obviously not everyone's married and not everyone has kids. Or like, what about like career-based people who don't do any of that stuff, don't get married, don't really worry about love as much, and like, and that's also a neutral statement. Like that's neither good or bad. It depends on the person, but like how they kind of like maybe they go down a different path because they're worried about like becoming CEO of a company or something.
Right. I think really, as you go on in life, the really big thing is about the attachments you make. And may that be attachment to another person, a child, a job, really.
Who is the attachment guy again?
Like for your videos?
No, like the psychologist.
Oh,
Arlo?
attachment. I don't think we've gotten to that unit yet.
Oh, well, he like had monkeys and stuff.
Oh, we did talk about that. That.
Here, you keep going and I'll look it up.
All right. So, yes. According to Erickson's stages, the adults are also going through their own stages as well. And there's about, I'm pretty sure, 3 adult stages that they go through. So there's the intimacy stage, which what I was talking about, like kind of like the attachment, like whether you find people who you like to be with, they can be friends, they can be coworkers.
Yeah.
But just finding a group of people that you enjoy being with. And so if you don't find that, then you usually then the opposing thing is isolation, which is not often recommended. But really, those young adulthood is about finding people you enjoy forming relationships with. And so you have to form, anytime you form a new relationship, you have to define yourself with relation to them. And especially like having a child, you have to define yourself in the new role of a parent. And it's a big shift. A lot of people experience that. But people who don't have children, They have other shifts too. Then that's really the one about attachment, and then in later adulthood, you really have kind of like stages about, am I making a difference? Did I make an impact on the world? And that's kind of but
That's
in the
Erickson too, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm basically repeating his stages. So yeah, but in every one of those adult stages as well, I would argue that there is an aspect of identity that might change or not with relation to all those things. So it's identity is definitely not stagnant. You also, it starts forming before you're an adult as well, because I could not see a single like fourth grader who doesn't have like a personality, but it's not necessarily fully formed, and they haven't started per se like questioning what they really think, and that's not like presented to them. But that's not like a definitive statement. I'm sure there are fourth graders who question the system and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's just like overall they're not as developed, so they're not as
Right.
knowledgeable to the world around them.
I think the point I'm trying to make is like that I said before was these stages are not necessarily suggestions, but they are not set in stone either. And every
Yeah.
person has their own unique journey that they go through to
Well, it's like a
form
normal
an
curve,
identity.
you know?
It's like a what? Sorry.
A normal curve. It's like all these stages are like
Yeah.
the average, but like of
Right.
course with like a way to present data like that, like a normal
Yeah,
standard
a bell
curve,
curve.
it's like
Yeah.
everyone, like most people, if not everybody, falls out of line with the average, even if it's by like a small decimal.
Right.
It's
Right.
all it is an average of all the different people, but like everyone's different. Like below the average is like people who aren't as developed with their identity at insert stage here, and then above average, like maybe the child prodigies, like the fourth graders who really know what's up.
Yeah.
And by the way, it is Harlow. I was right.
Oh, okay. Cool.
He
Cool.
he believed in attachment and kind of how like he had
Yeah.
like two like fake
Yeah.
monkey parents, and like
Mhm.
one was like iron and not fun to hold, and it
But it
just
fed them, right?
food. And then the other
Yeah.
one just had like a nice cloth to it, and
Mhm.
the monkey would go to the one with food when it was hungry, but most of the time it would just hug the other one, because
Right.
like just the
Yeah.
act of hugging it, like the
Now
attachment.
that you're saying that, I definitely remember that.
Yeah.
We went over it. But yeah, so it's interesting. And I would argue that like a lot of animals in the animal kingdom, especially ones with a cortex, like monkeys and other species, probably do form identities as well. They might not be as complex as us, but I won't know. I can't speak monkey. I can't speak many animal languages, and
Yeah.
but I would say that they definitely form an identity with relation to their family or their
Yeah.
like tribe, and also with themselves. I don't think necessarily as much, because animals are very group based often, but I mean some animals might be very individualistic, or like not individualistic, but like just have an individual identity, and we might not know.
Yeah.
Like, just think about your pets. Like, I would describe my pets as having a distinct personality. Even like I have two cats, and they each have their own like their own way they react to things, and very distinctive like reactions and
Yeah.
things. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask though, this might seem contrary to the entire video, but does everyone need an identity?
I I suppose if you didn't have one, it would be very difficult. Like I think something that I would say doesn't have an identity is probably like a robot, like a cyborg or something. Not a cyborg. I'm not saying the right word. Like just like a robot that's like looks like a human, walks like a human, but doesn't have the same emotions as humans, and I think identity formation with humans is very second nature. It just happens. It's not
Like they just
something that,
have an identity whether they perceive it or not.
yeah, it just happens sometimes. Like, you don't go out to the store and say, hey, I'll have one identity. I'm gonna have let's see, I'm gonna have this aspect and this aspect. No, it just happens. It's like it's often genetic. I mean, with everything in psychology, it's both genetic and like nature and nurture and other aspects. But
Yeah.
it
But my
doesn't.
question is like that's for sure. But we've been talking about like the journey of trying to find it. And like just thinking about it, it's like I know there's a lot of people who are on the journey like you and I, who like we're definitely on the journey to like find out who we are like through life. But there's some people who just don't prioritize that, or they don't care, frankly.
Right.
But is that a bad thing? And that's what I mean by like, does everyone need an identity? Like, of course they have one via like the way they view themselves and the way we view them. But it's kind of like we kind of hold this idea close to us of an identity, while like
Right.
other people just don't think about it in this profound concept.
I mean, like
You know
I've
what
been
I mean?
saying, there's no one right way to do it. There's no one right way to live life. And
Yeah,
I don't think, like, if you don't focus on your identity, then you don't focus on your identity. If it doesn't cause you stress, or doesn't cause you to kind of like be uncomfortable, if you don't feel like you're living up to who you are, then
yeah.
yes, pay attention to it. But if okay, don't be like, I don't know, bliss and ignorance, but also it's if you're okay with who you are, that's who you are, and you don't need to change it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's,
Yeah.
you know. Um yeah, so I do think that even if they don't know it, oh sorry, yeah, I don't even if they don't know it, everyone does have at least a small amount of like an identity. And I mean,
Yeah.
as I was using like the robot example to not have an identity, but and I'd
Well,
say
these
that's
people
pretty
aren't robots, right?
right. I'm not saying they are, but I'm saying even robots sometimes can be coded in such a way that they have an identity, but I don't know, like, it might be a reflection of the person who coded them or something like that. But I don't know. Have you noticed that maybe? I don't know. I don't
Like,
think they have as much identity like as a human, and I don't think it's as important to them because they're just executing code. But I do think sometimes like robots programmed to make snarky responses, that's a part of like identity, like how you respond to things. Like, do you quip back or something like that? But I am in no way saying that like people who don't focus on like making their identity, like developing their identity, are robots. Like, if they're happy
well,
with who they
it's a
are.
strange metaphor, I will say that. Like, what is your point of mentioning that? I'm just curious.
Like the robot, I mean,
Yeah.
you were asking if not having an identity would like if people could not have identities. But I was bringing up the robot because that's probably the closest thing I can think of that doesn't have an identity. And it's people often like robots are kind of known to be I don't know, just very well, mechanical. Like, they don't make decisions for themselves because they're just executing the code that they're running. And they
But is this similar to people is the thing? Like, do you think there's a relation there?
I think there's a relation, but also at the same time, humans aren't executing code, and they have emotions that happen. And robots, unless they're very, very sophisticated, don't necessarily have emotions either. Don't have emotions, not either. Like, humans have emotions, but robots don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a big thing that plays into it because it matters to humans because they feel these things. If something's going wrong, they feel something. But if, like, a robot, they don't really feel things
So
as
with
deeply as we
that,
do.
does
I,
everyone need an identity?
well, as I said, I think everyone has one, even if they don't need one. But I think to survive basic level in the world, they don't need one. But to survive in society is another thing. And I think to survive in a society without an identity would be a very hard thing. Also, there are many stages. There's James Marcia came up with a few stages that people go through to define their identity, and there are 4 of them, and they're defined whether they have low or high exploration levels and low or high commitment levels. And so you start off in foreclosure, which has a low exploration level and a high commitment level, which means that you're committed to an identity, and it doesn't you haven't really questioned your identity. Like you're just like say you're a 4th grader, and you're just kind of like not questioning how you've been defining yourself. And then diffusion is the next stage, and it's low exploration and low commitment, and it's kind of just like you're not really considering your identity. You're just not thinking about it at all. Moratorium comes next, which is high exploration and low commitment, and you're just basically looking at every single option there is, flipping through the books and just trying everything out. And I think that happens a lot during the teenage years. It may happen during other years as well, but you're kind of just trying out different aspects of who you could be. And then once you find that one that really feels like you've reached achievement, which is high exploration and high commitment, which means that after you've explored all these options, you find the one that fits and you stick with it. And this stage, you don't go through it once, you don't go through it twice, there are multiple times, and you do this every single time. At least that's what James Marcia says. You do this every single time that you're defining yourself with an aspect of society. And since there's so many aspects of society, I'd say you go through it multiple times. But if you're okay with if you find the right identity first try, good for you. That's really exciting. But and these stages are just suggestions too. You don't have to go in a specific order. That's the order that most makes sense. But if you go in a different order, you go in a different order. And I'd say you could probably pinpoint where you are in certain steps, in certain points in your life. Like it might be interesting to think about that, like what step you're in right now in certain aspects with relation to certain aspects. But yeah, that's just an interesting thing to think about, because it does make a good amount of sense. Like you start off well defined, but you haven't really thought about whether that well defined thing fits you well, and then then after that you're not really thinking about it. You're just kind of not really, it doesn't really matter to you that much at that moment. And then after that you're kind of looking, you're searching, but you don't know where you're going to go with it. And then once you find where you go with it, you finally found who you are. And I find that last stage has quite the sense of satisfaction, at least in my experience, because knowing who you are is a really satisfying thing. And I don't know really how to describe it, but and I think many people could also agree with that, is that finding out who you are is a great thing. And I think it'd be mainly because making how you fit in that puzzle, how you fit in the world. And it's a very nice feeling, but it doesn't necessarily you can have other good feelings that come outside of that. But it's a great feeling also because you can kind of explain things that you do or think as well. Like I know I like to have reasons to put behind my different ideas or opinions or just things that I think, and and it's satisfying. What do you think, Casey? Have you felt that ever?
Like what in particular?
Just satisfaction once you finally figure out who you are, and it lines up with the things that you do and think. Have you ever felt that before?
Yeah, just kind of when you do something or embrace a part of yourself. That's just very maybe I've been hiding this for a long time.
Yeah.
Maybe this was the step I needed to take. And you get it right. You feel like you're in the right place,
Conversely,
I felt that with band. I feel that with choir. I feel that with this project. culmination.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I'm kind of meant to do this, you know?
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
that's the line. It's like I'm meant to do blank. That's like the identity,
Yeah.
like a sense
Yeah.
of purpose, which we talk about in episode 4, purpose and conflict.
And yeah, that's a very interesting thing, and I agree. And also conversely, if you don't find that identity that you're looking for, if you don't find that like word to put to what you like who you are, then I find that sometimes it can be hard. Like it often in some circumstances it can cause like inner turmoil, which like where if you are placed in certain circumstances or situations, it creates discomfort. And if you can't label that discomfort, it's a kind of it's a very aggravating
Yeah.
experience, because I don't know, as humans we like to label things a lot and
Yeah.
put things in categories, which can sometimes be good and sometimes be bad, but all
Yeah.
in all, it creates this discomfort that you don't know how you're supposed to act in a certain scenario, or you don't know why you want to act in a certain way. And that's
Yeah.
kind of why I'd say defining an identity is so important, especially when you're just about to go out into the world and make a bunch of decisions as a teenager.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Well,
Yeah.
also it's like really like the big thing that helps with that is just being able to articulate yourself. Like articulate what you mean, understanding your emotions so that you can transfer it into words so that people can understand. And that's something everybody needs to learn.
Yeah.
Like starting out like some people it comes naturally, but they still kind of have to figure it out. And then other people it's just like they have to figure out how to do all of that. Like I don't know how I feel, and then once they do, it's like, how do I put this into words?
Yeah.
Just like expressing yourself. And when you can do that, then it's a lot easier to understand your identity, because not only does it become clearer what your identity is, but now you can kind of like express it into words. Like my identity is someone who's hardworking or intellectual or relaxed, or like my purpose in life is to help people or become rich, like whatever it is, you know.
Yeah. It's exactly what you said. Yeah, it's exactly what I was trying to say. And then there comes like, besides that discomfort that comes with not knowing your identity, if you formed your identity and you don't necessarily like something happens that kind of where you don't act in accordance with how your identity has developed you to be, I think that also creates some discomfort. So like, for example, say if you've like defined yourself as like smart or like an intellectual, and then you flunk a test, and then where does that leave you? Like, are you still allowed to define yourself as smart if you've gotten a 60% on a test or something like that?
That's like some cognitive dissonance where it's
like
your behavior doesn't affect your mindset. So it's like, what do I choose? Do I like accept that I'm dumb, or just accept that I'm smart and I just goofed? Or like,
exactly.
Where do you go next?
Yeah, and I think, and I've gone through this, I've gotten some grades that I'm not proud of on a test, but I mean, luckily not too many, but then afterwards I feel terrible. I don't know, and then it takes me quite a long time comparatively to you know, like settle down, and I always feel like I've let someone down, and I don't know, like it's probably that someone is multiple people, which is like myself, my teacher, my friends, and it's not a great feeling. I'll tell you that it's not a great feeling.
1.
Why do you feel that way?
1, 2, 3.
I guess it's hard to describe, but I feel like I have like this like by by defining myself as smart, like I feel like I have this like obligation to like be a really good student, which is great for me sometimes because it kind of drives me to do really good work. But then when I don't get the good results, it drives me down. Like I feel like I've not met my expectations of, you know, doing well. And why didn't I do well? Because I studied so much. Oh, I must be dumb. But that's not true. Like, you don't have to. Flunking one test, first of all, is not. Flunking one or two tests is not, like, it's not a sign of dumbness. Tests, honestly, aren't the only sign of intelligence. And if you think that it is, then you're gonna have, like, some not good self-esteem issues. Yeah.
Wait, I want to say that, like, kind of like identity as a whole. We mentioned, like, averages and standard before, but, like, really just identity is like the average of you, like,
right,
like, you know, like the identity like that you exhibit is the culmination of you, like just everything you do, your thoughts, your morality, your actions. Like, I'm going to make like many more videos after this one, and I've already made some before, but really this is like the big picture here. Like, all of that feeds into this, if you think about it. Like, this is the apex. But to understand that, it's like, because it's an average and everything goes into it, like, if your identity is that you're a good person, and I guess my definition of a good person, like, to just explain that is, I mean, I just view a good person as someone who, on average, tries their best to better themselves and people around them. Like, and with that, with averages, it's like you can make mistakes. You can even have malintent. Like, you can be, for all intents and purposes, an asshole. Like, you can be someone who's mean or a jerk. And as long as that's not consistent, like if it happens once or twice or like 5 years ago or something, it's like, yes, it does add to the average, unfortunately, just because some people might remember, but like it doesn't define who you are, because what defines who you are is just the culmination of everything. Because with every mean thing you've ever said or done, there's probably hundreds of other things good that completely like skew your average, which means that you're better than that. Like, your identity is something a lot better. And like,
I'd also say, go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, like you can fail a test. You can be mean to somebody. You can like completely do something uncharacteristic of you. But that doesn't change who you are and how everyone perceives you on average. And I just think that's important, because it's not like a stagnant thing. What are your thoughts?
I'd also say that if intelligence is the only word you use to define your identity, it'd be probably good to define yourself with respect to things more than that, because intelligence it fades. Like when you get older, you forget a bunch of things. And so if you define yourself only based on your intelligence, you're going to experience a lot of insecurities as you lose that intelligence. But I would suggest defining yourself less by like temporary smarts. And even if you like, intelligence is you're allowed to have that as part of your identity, but I'm just saying I wouldn't have it as the only part of your identity. I would lean more on your identity with respect to friends and family, because those things, they don't go away. Even if someone died, like, it's just, you still have that connection, and those connections are what stay and what are like basically what last. And so yeah.
And I mean, like, to kind of clarify on that, like, your fluid intelligence, which is basically your cognitive speed and ability, that's what declines. But your crystallized intelligence, basically your overall knowledge, that will actually increase. But as you know, like, as you get older, like, your capacity to hold, or not to hold information, but just like the speed of it wanes. So I just kind of wanted to clarify on that, just because it's like intelligence is important and can be important, or can be important to you. But really, just like you said, it's like, well, really, it shouldn't be, your identity shouldn't be one thing.
Right.
Because it's an average, it's a culmination of everything.
Put all your eggs in one basket, it's not a great thing. But
yeah.
Another example that's not really related to like intelligence, but just like a more like a general example that doesn't have to be like flunking a test or anything, or like an action specifically, but just like an opinion. Like say you hold a certain set of beliefs, and you're asked a moral question, and your answer, you say an answer, but you're answering it to your friend. So, and then later you're thinking about it, and maybe you're thinking that, did I answer that question in a certain way to please my friend? Did I answer it with accordance to my morals? And if you say that you answered it for a reason other than it lining up with your morals, then that can also be a sense of like discord and discomfort, because acting in ways that don't line up with your morals or your beliefs, it can be kind of just discomforting. And also at the same time, you don't, it's like I said earlier, it's hard to know what you really believe with like everyone else's influence. And so if you really do know what you believe, really, you should totally stick true to it. But yeah.
Well, also with that, just like keep in mind that one failure, one like mistake doesn't change everything, but it's easy to think that it does. And really, I just kind of want to bring this up, like with that, like, at least I think about this, but I bet other people do too. Like, just like, you want to prove your worth, like that you're worth something. And it's like, that's very dangerous, because when you like put your worth into things, like, more often than not, you're going to see how quote unquote worthless you are. And that doesn't mean that you're worthless. It just means that if you fail or make a mistake, you've put so much pressure on yourself that you make yourself feel like you're worthless. But that's not true, because as I explained, and as we've talked about, like, it's an average. Like, that's impossible for one mistake to define who you are. But it's like, think about like you're playing an instrument, and you've been playing for 8 years, and then you like had a really bad concert, and you felt like, I'm supposed to be good at this. Why did I like completely flunk at the concert? And you forget about those reasons that probably made you flunk, like all of your family members were in the audience and that made you a little embarrassed, or like there was somebody you had a crush on in the audience, like other like confounding variables that probably went into why you actually messed up. But it doesn't matter, because you put your whole like worth into that. Like this defines who I am. Like, I feel like that could be a toxic aspect of identity, because when you think so much about your identity, it becomes a manifestation of like, this is what I live up to. This is why I exist. And it's kind of like it goes from your purpose to the thing that literally defines you. And if anything goes against that, like, you open yourself up to an attack, and it's going to hurt. So like, just be careful about that. Like, your worth is defined by the culmination of things you do and believe in and everything like that, and just your efforts to better yourself and be a good person, really. It doesn't, like, don't go into a test thinking, if I fail this, I didn't prove my worth, or if I didn't make that job, I didn't own up to things. Like I've been studying like pre-med for years, and I didn't pass the test and make it into med school. That doesn't mean that all of your years were worthless and that like all of that went down the drain. Maybe because of that failure, it makes you stop and think about what you want to do, and you end up going down the business route or some other route that you actually wanted to do, you know? Like, failure can teach you to be better, or like maybe it also tells you like, like, oh, I guess I didn't do well on the test, but I still love, like, I still want to make it into medical school, so let me just try really hard and have more of a purpose for this, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's another thing to be aware of, is that an identity isn't really for anyone other than you. I mean,
Mhm.
it'll affect how you interact with people, but
And it's
it's not for
influenced by other people,
it's
but it's
yeah, and
still
it's
you.
influenced by other people, but it's still mainly something for yourself to define yourself by. It's it's something for yourself, kind of like a general book of like instructions for how to go
Yeah.
about things, but it's a suggestion, but also once you find your right identity, usually it lines up with things, but also if you break from it, it's not going to it shouldn't disappoint others, because it's something for you, and if it disappoints yourself, then that kind of could, if you frame it in the right way, it shouldn't be something that like brings you down. It should be something that makes you think and sets you forward in life,
Yeah.
so that you act the way that makes you feel most comfortable in the next when the next challenge comes to pass.
Mhm. Yeah. And
So yeah.
yeah. Um, man, what was I what was I gonna say? What were you saying exactly again? Just like a quick refresher, so I.
Identity is something for yourself, not for others.
Yeah.
And
Um, and with that, kind of tying it back to how I mentioned, like, it's good to articulate yourself and, like, understand your emotions and be able to put it to words. It's like, that's a great moment to have that skill, because it's like when you do feel like you let yourself down, you didn't prove your worth in air quotes, um, and you're feeling like crap, like, you should be communicable to people and tell them how you feel, because they can help you, like, especially those people who care about you and you care about. You know what I mean?
mhm.
So,
Yeah.
like, when you do fall hard, it's like they can help you with that.
That's also why it's important to form those connections as well.
Right.
Like I can't stress how important it is to have a good support base below
Yeah.
you. Just, in times of need. And it's also important that if your friend's going through something, you should help them out too. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And these connections, it's just like, I don't know,
yeah.
they really are kind of, timeless in a way, and, like, when you get it right,
Yeah.
you do. Because, like, I mean, think about, like, me and you for an example. Like, I don't think I really get into this with guests, but, like, we were good friends when you went to school with me, and then, like,
Mhm.
was it last year you moved?
Yeah.
Yeah, you moved across the country, and we still talk,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
we're
I'm
doing
glad
a
about
video
that.
now, so, like, even if people come and go, are they really gone?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I was kind of going as far to say that even if someone dies, that connection that you had with them, it can still live on
Yeah.
in your memories and other things. And so, connections, I would say, are probably the most immortal thing that we have as a society today. Well, one of the most immortal things, except maybe, I don't know, uh, radioactive elements, but those decay too. But I don't know. They just the point is, connections are really important. And
Mhm.
yeah,
They help
so
define who we are.
yeah, they do. And also, like with the teenage years, it kind of marks a transition from when you mainly rely on your parents, to when you mainly like go with your peers and stuff. And not saying that you don't have
And
peers
yourself.
when you're younger, but it's kind of like a shift where it's about who you listen to the most, I guess, and
Yeah.
who you spend the most time with. And I think that also, like, it's developmentally appropriate that you start spending a lot of time with your friends, and you spend less and less time with your parents as you grow older, and that one kind of prepares you to go into the real world, but also has an effect on your behaviors and your like identity. But I would it's also an interesting question to ask, kind of like the chicken and the egg question is, what comes first? Do you make friends with people who are like you, so which makes it so that or so you make friends with people who are like you already, or does your identity form from the group that you're in?
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit of both. It depends, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but as
Really,
I said,
just all feeds into each other.
yeah, definitely. But just make sure that you're also not like your identity isn't only the group that you have
Yes.
outside. You have like something outside of the group to hold on
Well,
to.
again, just like don't put your worth on one thing.
Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this whole discussion.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, what is the big takeaway here as we begin to close?
Yeah, I'd say number one, there's no right way to form an identity, but just even in the process of like, if you're in a current journey to form your identity, really, where was I going with that? Sorry, if you're in a process, you're in a journey forming your identity, you're already kind of like, parts of this journey are going to shape how you act, and really, a lot of identity forms subconsciously. So you're gonna form an identity, but it is, as I said, there's no one right way to do it. So don't be worried if you're not following a certain set of rules. You are, no matter what you do, there's no right and wrong. Second thing is, like, you got to make sure that you stay true to yourself. Don't let yourself, you can let yourself be influenced by outside things, but make sure that they're not defining you, like societal norms and peer pressure and stereotypes. Like, they can influence how you want to be, but they shouldn't define how you want to be. There's no one right way to be you. And and then the last thing is the thing I just said was, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And also connections are very important, but don't put all your eggs in one basket, in that, like, if yourself relies on one thing and that one thing doesn't come through, or if it like falls, that's not a good thing for you. So yeah, I think that's all I have. Do you remember anything that we talked about more?
You covered most of it, but just like the point of identity is to just kind of as a tool to help us realize who we are, and just a sense of security, so when times get tough we can stay true to ourselves and kind of have our own selves to hold on to when things get tough. And also just like, we're not meant to completely find the answer 100% by the day we die. If we did, in a way that's almost meaningless, because it's like, oh, we just have to, like, oh, by the time I die it'll be a full meter, like I'll reach that 100%. But no, it's just the journey, and everyone has their own journey. So for some people it isn't finding their identity, but just like, I don't know, making a difference or something. So
and I think you bring up a good point there, is like, identity isn't the goal of life, but it's a tool that you use to help you along the way.
Yeah, exactly. It's a way to kind of organize and get the bits and pieces together. And you don't need to complete it by the end, but you can always see what you can do to try to, at least. So with that said, any like other thoughts before we end this?
No, I think we were very comprehensive.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess we'll end it there then. Thanks for coming on, Claire.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a good time.
Yeah, been a real blast.
Indeed.
Although my dogs were driving me insane during this. I had to mute myself to like yell at them. Like, if I didn't mute, like your ears would be pierced.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah,
They're
it was a
going
bit rough,
crazy.
but we made it through. So with that, thanks for joining, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, listening, and I'll see you next time.